Hello everyone, this is Selena from KPE404 and you're listening to the first ever past and present frequency radio show. Pandemic outbreaks dramatically change lives and relationships, but what would a pandemic look like in the 21st century? The overarching theme of this podcast will delve into how the case of objectivity negatively affects attempts at resocialization and reintegration into society. It's a question that would be hard for anyone to answer here in 2019. However, to help me navigate today's conversation, I'm fortunate enough to have a special guest here with me today. Myself. Well, it's actually not me per se, but a future me from 2022, a time plagued with a deadly pandemic caused by COVID-19. I definitely don't think I could have ever fathomed this occurring in the near future or in my lifetime at all. So I'm really glad to have myself here today, as she's going to be sharing her story and perspectives of her life in a pandemic. So hello me, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's so great to be here.
It's great to have you here. So tell us, what is COVID-19?
Right, so essentially the world is in a pandemic right now, and you'll experience it at the end of 2019. It's been around for just over 2 years now. But the cause of it is COVID-19, a viral infectious disease that can spread from an infected person's mouth or nose in small liquid particles when they cough, sneeze, speak, or breathe. Some safeguarding measures that were implemented were to stay at least 6 feet apart from others, wearing a properly fitted mask, washing your hands, or using an alcohol-based rub like hand sanitizer, as well as getting vaccinated. We were severely policed, like not allowed to leave the country, go to restaurants, movies, basically anything recreational. But I think these measures, whether it's for the body or as big as a national regulation, they're interacting with the ambiguity of the virus. That is, being everywhere and nowhere all at once, and it's merging with different bodies and surroundings, like an invisible enemy. As per Fowler, the external boundaries, orifices, and weak points of one's own body, like the skin, mouth, and nose, must be manipulated, equipped, and cared for in a special way to prevent the virus from crossing the line between the outside to the inside of the body. All means to prevent abjection, face the challenge of bodily integrity, and maintain social order.
What is objectivity?
So, objectivity is something Julia Kristeva explored in her book, Powers of Horror. The abject is a concept that is often used to describe bodies and things that one finds repulsive or disgusting. And in order to preserve one's identity, they're cast out. So an abject body is a body sick with COVID, for example. Abject embodiment is a state in which the self has little control over the leaking nose, the coughing, sneezing, snot, saliva, and they're just immediately labeled as disgusting. Something we can't stand to see. It's basically like everything that's normal bodily functioning making its physical appearance outside the body. And its untidiness violates not only biological but normative boundaries.
So what did this mean for you? What was it like?
Firstly, I think the main thing that was scary was having parents on the front line. You know, since mom is an emergency nurse and dad worked at the retirement home, mom would always have stories about people not being able to breathe and hooked up to O2 tanks. So I always took the severity of COVID super seriously versus people who were always skeptical and didn't believe that it could be that bad, and they even still do believe that it's not even that bad. I also think it was scarier for me and our sister because we thought mom and dad might bring it home and we were going to get it and then pass it on to friends.
So how was your social life impacted then?
I know that your version of me loves going out. I remember wanting that full university experience back then, and I loved going to bars and not being afraid to like share drinks or even like kiss a random person. But like now, if you're asking me, I can't even bring myself to think about doing those things. Even back when COVID was just beginning, I was super careful. I mean, I remember when I used to hang out with this one friend, Kate, and I thought she was being careful like I was, you know, keeping our social bubble super small. And, you know, she was the only friend I was seeing, and I thought it was kind of like a loyalty thing, you know, just respecting each other. And I found out that she was seeing all these other people, and she would tell me these stories about friends and guys she was seeing, and it really put me off because like I thought she was doing the same thing too, and I didn't really hang out much with her after that. And also I feel like my germophobia became more of an intense thing. I was super scared of getting sick before COVID, and I know you know, whenever I saw people eating lunch after touching the subway or door handles and things like that, and they wouldn't wash their hands before eating. I would always ask like, hey, do you want a wipe? Do you want hand sanitizer? And even when my friends were sick, I wouldn't sit as close to them as I normally would, I would sit a little further away from people, keep my distance.
Yeah, I totally understand. I feel like for you, all those fears were just 10 times more intense.
Yeah, like coughing or sneezing now, I literally feel ashamed to do that. Sometimes I literally hold in my cough or sneeze because I'm scared other people might think I'm sick. Or I hold my breath when I walk past people when I'm not wearing a mask outside because I'm scared they're sick. I'm just so disgusted being near people because I literally don't want their breath on me. Like, for me, buying toilet paper wasn't my way of symbolically maintaining the self-clean and proper body, like Fowler says. It was wearing a mask for me.
Since normal things that are inside the body are now out, it threatens our existence and even relates to personal, moral, and social significance. Tell me, did you get COVID or know anyone with COVID?
No, I never got COVID. A few of my friends did, though.
And how did that make you feel?
It honestly made me scared. Even if they had COVID and they weren't contagious anymore, I didn't want to be physically near them. And honestly, it made me look down on them in a way because they mostly got it from traveling or recreational activities. And it's like, well, why are you doing that? Do you not care? And then it's like, boom, objection, versus mom, who has to work on the front line. I definitely think she would be considered a superhero versus my friends in a cultural sense. And also, even thinking about the way that they talked about their bodies as an it, like how it had to cope with having COVID. I think this sounded so detached from themselves, and it's like their own body betrayed them and became unreliable even though they were vaccinated. And as per Waskell and Van der Riot, I guess the corporeal eruption can alienate the self from the body. And in these cases, we can see how the body becomes disconnected and alien to the self in personal ways. And it's scary. It's really scary to think about, and I'm terrified of becoming sick with it because all these thoughts run through my head.
What's it like wearing a mask every day?
That's actually a funny question because at the beginning I didn't really want to, but now I literally cannot leave my house without one. It gives me a sense of security, and in a way, back when there were mandatory mask mandates in Ontario, it made me feel more connected with society because it made you feel like everyone cares. But now, since the mandates were lifted, only some people like me are still wearing them, even when, you don't have to. And it makes me feel alone in a way, and also super judgmental of other people and their choices.
In what way?
In a morality way. COVID made me have such harsh opinions on the unmasked and the unvaccinated, to the point where I'm like, okay, well, if you want to die and get sick, that's not my issue.
I think your perspective stems from objection. Objection results in the degradation and the exclusion from the moral community of those who are invaded by the abject.
Right, and even just to expand on morality a little bit, when we see something we perceive as unjust, we struggle to understand it and then end up rejecting it. I find myself asking, what's wrong with that person? I'm not like that. And it kind of seems like a betrayal, like a taint to society. The whole of society is split into two, the masked and the unmasked. And many people feel like they're in a liminal state, which forces you to end up picking a side. And for me, it's not really an effort to wear one. It protects me and others, and it's a really easy thing to do.
So do you think you feel negatively about people who choose not to wear a mask or be vaccinated?
I do, yeah, but also in a way I feel like the media messages from the government really shape the way I view other people.
Yeah, the government kind of instills the sense of Foucault's theory of biopower, right? The emphasis on the fully docile, self-regulating, self-surveilling citizen, an orderly citizen, and fostering discipline over society to be efficient.
Yeah, the mandates became this established norm that keeps us safe, and in turn you protect the national body as a whole, allowing us to continue to maintain our population and to maintain our societies. And even with his concept of governmentality, the scientific and medical community, the CDC and the WHO, were the greatest actors that influenced human conduct and behavior since the start of the pandemic. Like, I learned from the CDC about the benefits of mask wearing and the importance of being aware of one's overall health and the possible symptoms for signs of infection and regulating my body to know if I'm sick and just being more aware in that sense. I think this ideology paved the way for how I thought and even continue to think. Like, I definitely felt orderly and disciplined and encouraged to adhere to the expected behavior promoted by institutions, and even more socially, like before, when it was more of a sense of unity to flatten the curve. I liked that. I liked staying apart together, that sort of thing. Masks have this symbolic meaning, especially when we're dealing with an invisible illness where the worst effects are in intensive care units that we can't see. And even now, going into the sixth wave and looking at COVID cases in Ontario, the spiking is concerning. The mask serves as the reminder that the pandemic is still ongoing, and when you remove things like that, as well as like requirements and restrictions, it weakens the notion that there's a purpose to do anything. A perception of like, is there even a risk? Is there a degree of risk? It's such a strong predictor of individuals engaging in protective behavior. People won't wear masks if you tell them there's no danger, and since COVID has no borders or rules, it comes as a threat to our reality and ultimately is being ignored.
Kind of sounds like terror management theory in a way.
Why? What is that?
It's by Greenberg and colleagues. It's basically a way for people to protect themselves against concerns about death. So with COVID, when concerns about death are conscious, people will wear masks and get vaxxed to provide protection. But for many, now mortality is no longer salient, and concerns about the severity of COVID became minuscule, just like the need to employ proximal defenses.
Yeah, I agree.
So is there this sense of stigma, like Goffman referring to visible features of someone that makes you consider them to be unfit to include in mainstream society?
Yeah, like it even allows me to go beyond the available information of them not wearing a mask and then make judgments about their personality. It's like they went against the rules, they weren't disciplined and don't care about other people, they're irresponsible, reckless, they saw too many people so they kind of deserve it, and they're dangerous people. Not that the disease isn't dangerous, but they're a dangerous person, and then they get placed into this group like, oh, they're all conservatives, they're all Floridians, and they aren't doing their moral duty, you know?
Yeah, like in this case, the concept of objection not only demonstrates a deeper cultural significance of hygiene, but also reveals conflict, like in discrimination and social inequality. So when looking through a cultural sociological lens, the safeguarding measures taken against COVID question the symbolic nature of cleanliness and purity. The cultural dimensions of hygiene show that the construction of purity is crucial to social order, and efforts to maintain or reestablish this order are often at the expense of those who are considered impure, like infected and contagious. And I also just wanted to point out that the labeling theory by Becker talks about people attaching labels to others in order to ease their understanding of their social world around them. It's like those not wearing masks are deviant and their behaviors are opposite to what the socially acceptable standards are in COVID. So they become the recipients of negative psychosocial, emotional reactions of the society, hence stigmatized.
Like wearing a mask is loyalty to the protection of the community. It shows you care about other people and it's the respectful thing to do. If someone isn't wearing one, I think they're selfish and horrible, and in a way I become discriminatory against them. And I think a part of the source of my stigma comes from that period of time where everything was super policed and like unvaccinated people weren't allowed in places. But since I was vaxxed and I had my vax passport, I was allowed to, and it gave me this sense of power and status, and it gave me a sense of control, and it boosted my self-esteem and reduced my anxiety in a way because I felt like I was doing something right.
This also sounds like terror management theory.
Without a mask, there's like this heightened existential anxiety that I think stems from acknowledging the possibilities of death. Like, death is so sudden and shocking, and it's happening all around me all the time. So it triggers these negative attitudinal reactions against those who threaten my belief in my immortality, like the maskless, the COVID infected, the suspects of it. The mask is the only physical, tangible thing left for me that keeps me feeling like I'm gonna prosper and have this sense of lastingness in this pandemic. And I guess it's all just a really intricate extension of objectivity.
So how do you feel about re-socializing yourself back into everyday life?
It's really hard to think about being around people again. Looking back, the hard lockdowns were like Goffman's theory of total institutions, except the institutions weren't jail, it was being locked up at home, which was like jail, honestly. Like being totally isolated from the rest of society for a specific period of time and under tight control. It was like a desocialization. And for me, it's so weird because I feel like I don't even know what to talk about anymore to other people. Like nothing is happening in my life and every day kind of blurs into the next, and I just feel like quiet in a conversation because my friends seem to have so many stories and I just don't. So I feel like through the pandemic, I feel like I was being re-socialized to be socially immobile, and now we have to be re-socialized again to have the social skills that I once had pre-pandemic. And it's hard because if you're isolated from other people for an extended period of time, you end up feeling awkward and anxious and unable to tolerate what used to feel normal. And now it's going to be a process of re-socialization across family, school, work, media, government, healthcare. It's like relearning new values and norms, and I don't want to be afraid of that. But yet there's this part of me that reacts in fear of strangers if they're sick, distancing, and in a way it leads me to have a lack of optimism. Like I'll never be the same person from 2019, and it feels depressing and isolating because of the divide in society, and everyone seems to be moving on, but I feel stuck, like Lane's decline of happiness. But I think that hopefully everyone feels awkward in some way, so like it's a pro environment with this shared emotional connection like before, the sense of unity.
I know this whole time we spoke about breath and particles being the abject, but I feel like there's definitely more than one objection, like the virus, the infection or the infected body, and the relationship between the infected and uninfected bodies.
Yeah, throughout this whole discussion, I think it's all of them, and they all intertwine and go beyond hygiene, but affects me socially, which in turn affects other people who also experience exclusion, discrimination, and disrespect. But I do have a question for you if you have the answer. How do you think I can move on from social objection and moving on from disgust?
Firstly, I think scientific evidence might help to show you that it's okay now. Like, there needs to be more information and studies done on COVID and its future as a virus and vaccines to actually prevent it before you can be like, okay, I'll get closer to the stranger at the checkout line. But I also think, based on our conversation, cultural sociology has to address not only the symbolic significance of hygiene, but also the morality. While objection is an inner psychological process, it works to develop the self while excluding, discriminating, and stigmatizing others as consequences, and are issues that society has to face and address. Everyone is vulnerable, and I think you should definitely allow the voices of the stigmatized to be heard and listen to their stories, even if they're sick or not. And acknowledging universal vulnerability, it's possible to be kind and caring and offer humanity as a way to encounter exclusion. I also think standing in solidarity with people can help you overcome discrimination and disrespect. Many people who were already excluded feel like nothing has changed.
I know that Asian communities faced enormous discrimination. I remember the Wuhan soccer team was stranded in Spain and they reported that hotels canceled the rooms that they had already booked, and the teams from other countries refused to play against them, and any excuse anyone had to be racist was amplified.
Yeah, and now with social distancing and people's attitudes with objectivity, people around the globe are now experiencing the same vulnerability that was only felt by some before. So I think that if everyone is respectful, then we can make progress. And I definitely think it has to go both ways, and then we can have a rebirth of public trust, close contact with others, reinvigorate civil public culture, and foster a greater appreciation for civic responsibility over private rights and freedoms. Fowler makes a great point from Kristeva in that the abject threatens both the individual self and symbolic order. Thus, the way to overcome objection is through recognition and empowerment to strengthen individual agency as well as that of the community. As per Kristeva, this would be a hopeful move towards a new set of ethics that will embrace an openness to the abject other.
Right, well, thank you for the advice. I definitely do think that objectivity plays a negative role in how many people like myself are going to reintegrate themselves into society, but it'll be baby steps. Just like we were able to adapt to lockdown, I'm sure that I can adapt to being in public again sooner or later, but most likely later.
Amazing. Well, it looks like we've come to the end of our time here today. It was really nice having you on the show, and thank you for giving us some insight on the case of objectivity and resocialization.
Thank you so much.
And thank you to our audience for tuning in, and be sure to stay safe out there.